The grand station loomed above the tranquil glow of Seraphis IV, its sleek metal curves glinting under the distant suns. It was the crown jewel of El Consejo, a testament to unity across the galaxy. Its corridors thrummed with voices of diplomats, generals, and envoys from every corner of known space. But today, unity was only a fractured dream. General Killar watched the assembly hall fill from his private chamber, his dark eyes studying the restless motions of delegates. The air was heavy, thick with anticipation and suspicion. Kalar's own species, the Talari, had served as mediators for centuries, their intellect and neutrality prized above all. Yet even he felt the strain. "General, the human representative has arrived," a voice chirped through his communicator. "Let her in," Kalar replied, his tone steady but laced with unease. The door slid open, revealing Commander Valeria Ivanova. Tall, blonde, and built like the soldier she was, Valeria carried herself with the rigid composure of someone used to conflict. The Russian flag stitched to her shoulder gleamed under the sterile lights. "Commander Ivanova," Kalar greeted, his deep voice resonant. "General Kalar." She inclined her head, the barest sign of respect. "I assume you've read the statement from Earth's High Command?" "I have, but I wanted to hear it from you." Her expression hardened. "Humanity is withdrawing from El Consejo. Effective immediately." The words hung between them like a drawn blade. Kalar's fingers twitched, but he maintained his composure. "I hoped your superiors would reconsider," he said slowly. "This separation will tear the galaxy apart." "Perhaps it should," Valeria shot back. "El Consejo has grown complacent. Its bureaucracy is strangling progress. Earth has given more than its share and received nothing but limitations in return. And yet, Commander, humanity rose from near extinction to prominence under our guidance." Guidance or control? Her gaze was sharp, cutting. When Earth faced the famine crisis, El Consejo provided aid only under terms that crippled our independence. When we developed FTL technology superior to yours, you restricted its use. We've been treated as children to be disciplined, not equals. Kalar's shoulders tightened. "You speak of arrogance, yet you would risk galactic war for pride." "No," Valeria replied, her voice low and firm. "For freedom." Silence. It was not the first time Kalar had heard such sentiments, but never so openly, so defiantly. Humanity's growing resentment had been whispered in back chambers, hinted at in carefully worded statements. Now, the pretense was gone. Earth has already recalled its diplomats and military advisors, Valeria continued. "My presence here is merely a courtesy. I am to return to our fleet within the hour. So this is a farewell. A warning," she corrected. "The High Command is willing to defend our sovereignty. Whatever alliances you thought you controlled, prepare to see them tested." Kalar studied her, noting the exhaustion behind her eyes, the weight of her words pressing down on her shoulders. She was a soldier, not a politician, yet here she was, waging a war of words with the galaxy's most powerful coalition. "If you leave, others will follow," he said. "Civilizations under El Consejo's protection will see your defiance and question their own loyalty." "That's their choice," Valeria replied. "The galaxy deserves to choose." She turned to leave, but Kalar's voice halted her. "War is inevitable, then?" Valeria paused, her back to him. "Perhaps, but it's not a war humanity wanted. Remember that, General." She exited, leaving Kalar alone with the echo of her words. He turned back to the viewport, eyes locked on the swirling stars beyond. Humanity's departure was not merely a fracture. It was a rupture, a splintering of ideals that had once bound the galaxy together. Over the next weeks, the Grand Station buzzed with anxious energy. Delegates argued and schemed. Alliances shifted and splintered. Kalar moved through the corridors like a shadow, observing, listening. Reports from the outer systems spoke of chaos. Human colonies, now cut off from El Consejo's support, fortified themselves against perceived threats. Their fleets, once cooperative, now prowled space with suspicion and readiness. KLAR's superiors demanded swift action. They called for sanctions, for displays of power to remind humanity of its place. But KLAR urged caution, his voice drowned by those thirsting for control. An emergency summit was called, but without Earth's presence, it was little more than a theater of frustration. Accusations flew across the chamber, old grievances resurrected under the guise of unity. The Talari struggled to maintain order, their authority eroding with each passing day. Meanwhile, KLAR delved into every report he could find. He studied Valeria's speeches, her strategies, her history. She was not merely a soldier. She was a symbol of humanity's ambition and frustration. It was clear she was preparing for war. And yet, KLAR sensed something deeper, an attempt to secure peace on humanity's terms, not El Consejo's. A truth buried beneath layers of propaganda and resentment. One evening, while the station's artificial night blanketed the halls in dim light, KLAR received an encrypted message. It came from a human envoy still loyal to El Consejo, one who feared the path their leaders had chosen. The message detailed a plot, an attack planned by rogue factions within El Consejo, designed to force humanity's submission through sheer terror. It was a desperate, reckless scheme, and one that would plunge the galaxy into bloodshed. KLAR's fingers trembled as he reread the transmission. His species had always believed in diplomacy above all else, but this conspiracy reeked of betrayal and hypocrisy. The next day, he requested a meeting with Valeria. She agreed, but only through a secure communication link. Her holographic image flickered before him, cold and resolute. "What do you want, General?" "To prevent a war neither of us can win," KLAR replied. "I have information, evidence of a plot within El Consejo to incite conflict with your people." She studied him, her gaze calculating. "Why tell me this?" "Because I would rather face your anger than live with the knowledge of an unjust massacre. Whatever our differences, humanity deserves the truth." Valeria's expression softened, the slightest crack in her armor. "Send me the details. If you're lying, General, I will make you regret it." "I would expect nothing less," KLAR replied. The transmission ended, but something had shifted. For the first time, KLAR felt the glimmer of hope piercing through the darkness. Yet even hope, he knew, could be a double-edged blade. The first strike came without warning. A mining colony on the edge of human-controlled space, Arlen's Reach, reduced to smoldering ruin within hours. Valeria stared at the holoscreen in her command chamber, eyes locked on the grainy footage of charred landscapes and shattered structures. Survivors' reports were sparse, garbled by panic and confusion, but one detail remained consistent. The attackers bore the insignia of El Consejo. "It wasn't us," KLAR's voice transmitted through the encrypted channel. His hologram flickered with the interference of their tenuous connection. "I swear it, Commander." "Then explain to me how a council fleet destroyed a civilian colony." Her tone was calm, but her fists clenched behind her back. "I told you there were factions working against us both. I've been trying to root them out, but they're more entrenched than I feared." "Convenient," Valeria snapped. "You warned me of a conspiracy, and days later, my people are massacred." KLAR's gaze darkened. "You think I would orchestrate this?" "After risking my own, standing to warn you." "Trust is a currency we can't afford anymore," she replied, her words bitter. "But I'm listening." The general hesitated, as though weighing the gravity of his words. "There are those within El Consejo who believe humanity must be subdued before your independence spreads like contagion. They've been gathering support, arms, ships. Their plan is to make your rebellion seem like an act of aggression, an Arlen's Reach, a false flag operation. They strike your territories, provoke your retaliation, and justify their own war." Valeria's jaw tightened. It made sense. The timing, the brutality. She'd suspected treachery, but not such calculated cruelty. Still, suspicion gnawed at her. "I want proof, KLAR. Not just words. I'm working on it. But understand, if my involvement is discovered, I will be labeled a traitor. And I doubt you would mourn my execution." Valeria's silence was its own answer. After a moment, she severed the connection. The darkness of her chamber felt deeper, heavier. Her aides awaited her orders. Captain Reyes, always loyal, stood with his arms crossed, his eyes filled with the same fury she felt. "What did the aliens say?" Reyes asked, his disdain barely concealed. "That we're being manipulated into war." "Do you believe him?" "I don't trust him, but I trust what I've seen." Valeria's gaze hardened. "Prepare the fleet. If they want a war, we'll give them one." Within hours, her ships were in motion, sleek vessels designed for speed and precision. They patrolled the borders, bristling with weapon systems optimized for both defense and retaliation. The galaxy had long viewed humanity as an upstart species, but Earth had adapted. And when it adapted, it thrived. KLAR's messages continued, fragments of intercepted communications and documents hinting at the shadow conspiracy within El Consejo. Valeria devoured every scrap of information, her suspicions slowly giving way to reluctant belief. The attacks escalated. Outposts torched, supply lines severed, entire fleets crippled by surprise strikes. And always, the same insignia branded upon the attackers. El Consejo's banner twisted into a symbol of terror. Valeria's forces responded with ruthless efficiency, but the damage was already spreading. Other species began to question their alliances, murmurs of discontent rippling through the galaxy. Reports of uprisings, rebellions, splinter groups severing ties with El Consejo. It was chaos, and it was spreading faster than anyone could contain. Through it all, KLAR's transmissions grew more desperate. His authority within El Consejo was crumbling, his allies dwindling. Yet he persisted, driven by some mixture of guilt and duty. "They're preparing something," KLAR said during one of their late-night transmissions. His hologram was faint, his figure wavering like smoke. "A final blow meant to cripple your entire fleet. If you don't act now, they will force you to retaliate in a way you can never undo." "Where?" "Yareth Prime. Their base of operations is hidden beneath the surface. They're amassing weapons, fleets. It's more than just crushing your independence. They want annihilation." Valeria stared at him, her mind racing. If KLAR was lying, sending her into a trap, it would be the end of everything. But if he spoke the truth, "What do you gain from this?" she asked. "I'm trying to save lives," KLAR replied, the sincerity in his voice unexpected. "Your people, mine, all of them. We were meant to protect the galaxy, not destroy it." She considered his words, searching for cracks, for deception. But all she found was a tiredness that mirrored her own. "Then help me," she said. "Help me stop them." Their alliance was tenuous, forged from necessity rather than trust. But it was enough. KLAR's information guided her fleet to Yareth Prime, a desolate world scarred by volcanic activity and brutal weather. Beneath its surface, however, lay something far more sinister. Valeria led the assault herself, her flagship spearheading the incursion into the planet's hidden depths. The facility was vast, sprawling through caverns reinforced with alien alloys and guarded by soldiers bearing the true insignia of El Consejo. Her forces clashed against them, the narrow corridors echoing with gunfire and shouted commands. The battle was vicious, brutal, but Valeria pressed on. She couldn't afford to fail. It was KLAR who guided her to the control room, his voice crackling through her earpiece with directions gleaned from years of bureaucratic insight. The final door stood before her, its metal frame scarred and dented from the conflict. Inside, the conspirators waited. Valeria entered with her soldiers flanking her, weapons raised. But it was not a firefight that awaited her. Instead, a small group of officials sat hunched over consoles, their expressions resigned. "You've ruined everything," one of them spat, a Sither official whose name Valeria did not care to remember. "You brought this upon yourselves," she replied coldly. "The galaxy won't be ruled by fear and manipulation." "And what will you replace it with?" the Sither countered, his eyes narrowing. "A fractured, chaotic mess? Humanity's independence will doom us all." "Perhaps," Valeria allowed, "but I'd rather see freedom tested than tyranny endure." The soldiers moved forward, securing the officials with practiced efficiency. As they were led away, Valeria glanced at the console, the data still displayed upon the screens. Schematics, fleets, plans for destruction on a scale she had only feared. "We have them," Kellar said through the communicator, his voice thick with relief. "The Council's true leadership will have no choice but to confront this betrayal." "It's not over," Valeria replied. "But it's a start." "More than that," Kellar insisted. "You exposed their hypocrisy. Perhaps now, real peace can be achieved." "Perhaps," she echoed, her gaze drifting to the stars visible through the fractured walls. The conspiracy had been revealed, but at what cost? Humanity's reputation was in ruins, their independence still contested. The galaxy trembled on the brink of something far worse than war. Valeria tightened her grip on her rifle. Whatever came next, she would be ready. The council chamber was silent, its grandeur reduced to shadows and suspicion. Delegates sat scattered, their faces tight with distrust. The recent exposure of the conspiracy had shattered what little faith remained in El Consejo's leadership. Valeria stood at the center of the room, her uniform immaculate, her gaze fierce. She was no longer just a commander. The message from Earth had been clear. She now spoke with the full authority of humanity's high command. But even that authority felt fragile, splintered like the galaxy itself. Kellar sat across from her, his tall frame bowed by exhaustion. His once proud demeanor had eroded over the weeks of conflict and revelation. The betrayal within his own ranks had cut him deeply, leaving scars that words could not mend. "Humanity is willing to negotiate," Valeria began, her voice steady. "But not under the old terms. El Consejo has proven itself incapable of maintaining peace. You've built a structure that rewards control over cooperation. Many would argue humanity's actions have only confirmed their worst fears," Kellar replied, his tone weary. "Your rebellion has inspired others to break away. Dozens of systems have declared independence, some with violence, some with pleas for freedom. And that frightens you." "It terrifies me," Kellar admitted, "because I know how easily fear turns to chaos. The conspiracy you exposed was built on that very foundation. And now it's spreading. Perhaps it's time to let go of the illusion of control," Valeria said. "El Consejo's authority has been waning for years. Earth's departure only hastened the inevitable. Then what do you propose? A new alliance, built on choice, not coercion. Mutual defense, mutual prosperity. But only for those who wish to be a part of it." Kellar's eyes narrowed. "You expect the galaxy to simply fall into line under your banner?" "No, I expect it to choose." The words echoed in the chamber, bouncing off marble and metal alike. Kellar regarded her with a careful, measured stare. There was respect there now, buried beneath the suspicion and grief. "It's a noble idea," he admitted. "But idealism has never been enough to hold the galaxy together. That's why we're offering something stronger. Not just protection, but opportunity. Opportunity, technology, resources, shared knowledge. If you truly wish to save lives, General, you'll see that what I'm offering is not conquest, but evolution." Kellar hesitated, his gaze drifting past her to the holographic display of the galaxy. It was fractured now, lines drawn between territories, splintered alliances forming and reforming with each passing day. There are still those within El Consejo who would rather see humanity crushed than negotiate, he warned. "They will not allow you to build your alliance without bloodshed. Then let them come." The words were sharp, edged with determination. Valeria knew the risks. Her fleet was strong but spread thin, their resources strained by constant vigilance. And yet, retreat was not an option. Kellar's expression softened, his shoulders sagging. "You are determined to see this through, aren't you? Until the end." A murmur rippled through the chamber as more delegates filed in. Some were familiar faces, allies from old campaigns or distant negotiations. Others were new, their expressions curious, wary. Valeria's words had reached beyond the battlefield. Worlds that had once dismissed humanity as brash and reckless now looked to her for guidance. The failed conspiracy had tainted El Consejo's reputation, and Valeria had seized that moment of weakness to push her vision forward. The meetings stretched on, debates flaring and subsiding like the waves of a turbulent sea. Kalear spoke sparingly, his gaze distant, his mind wrestling with doubts. But he remained present, his authority lending credibility to Valeria's cause. After hours of negotiation, a fragile agreement emerged. El Consejo would acknowledge humanity's independence, provided that Earth's new alliance did not encroach upon existing territories without consent. In return, Valeria pledged that her forces would aid in stabilizing regions torn apart by the conspiracy's machinations. The terms were imperfect, riddled with compromises and vague assurances. But it was a start. The chamber emptied slowly, the delegates dispersing to their ships and stations with promises to deliberate and consult their leaders. Valeria remained, her shoulders heavy with exhaustion. Kalear approached her, his steps cautious. "You've accomplished something few thought possible," he said. "A moment of peace, however tenuous." "It's only the beginning," Valeria replied. "But it's better than nothing." Kalear nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "There will be opposition, both from your own people and mine. Not everyone is willing to embrace change. Change doesn't wait for permission." He smiled at that, a faint, weary expression. "Perhaps you were right." She looked at him, really looked, and saw the weight he bore. His loyalty to El Consejo had been genuine, his dedication to peace sincere. But the corruption within had twisted his ideals, leaving him stranded between duty and morality. "You could join us," she said. The word surprised her as much as him. Kalear's brow furrowed. "Join you? Help us build something better. El Consejo is dying, whether you admit it or not. But your knowledge, your experience, it can make a difference." He hesitated, the conflict clear in his eyes. His entire life had been devoted to the council, to its ideals. To abandon it would be to betray everything he had sworn to protect. But Valeria's offer was not just a challenge. It was a lifeline. "I will consider it," Kalear said finally. "But understand my loyalty is not something I give lightly. I wouldn't want it if it was." They parted without further words, each lost in their own thoughts. Valeria returned to her quarters, the silence there a stark contrast to the chaos of the chamber. Her personal console blinked with messages from Earth's high command, strategists and politicians clamoring for updates and assurances. But she ignored them, her mind still replaying the conversation with Kalear. The alliance she envisioned was far from secure. Rival factions would rise. Enemies would seek to tear apart what she was trying to build. Yet for the first time, there was hope. Kalear's tentative support was a crack in the armor of El Consejo's rigid structure. And from that crack, something new could grow. Valeria stood at the viewport, her gaze fixed on the distant stars. Somewhere out there, enemies plotted her downfall. But she was ready. Whatever battles awaited, she would face them head-on, because freedom, once tasted, was a hunger that could never be sated. The sky above, Trian, foreburned with the fire of descending ships. Valeria's fleet cut through the atmosphere like blades, sleek vessels moving with purpose. Her flagship, the Resolute, hovered at the forefront, its shields gleaming against the bombardment of anti-aircraft batteries scattered across the barren surface below. Ground forces reporting heavy resistance. Reyes's voice crackled through her earpiece. His tone was grim but focused, the sort of voice that Valeria had come to rely on. They fortified every approach to the capital. "They were expecting us," she replied, her eyes fixed on the tactical display flickering across the console. Red dots swarmed the landscape. Enemy forces clustered in disciplined formations. Intel was bad. Or worse, they've learned to anticipate our strategies. Valeria's lips tightened. Since forging her alliance, her forces had expanded rapidly, drawing in recruits from dozens of worlds eager for a new order. But rapid growth came with its own dangers. Intelligence leaks, divided loyalties, sabotage. Each problem was a threat waiting to tear them apart. Kalear's reconnaissance suggested their defenses were minimal, Reyes continued. Either he was wrong, or someone's been feeding him false data, or someone betrayed him. The silence that followed was telling. Your orders, Commander? Send in the assault squads. We'll break their lines before they have a chance to reinforce. And Reyes, keep an eye on our communications. If there's a leak, I want it found. Yes, ma'am. Valeria switched channels, her voice cutting through the din of battle. All units, advance. We take the capital today, or not at all. Her words galvanized the troops, their determination reflected in the surge of movement across the landscape. Drop pods slammed into the ground, their occupants spilling out with weapons raised and eyes sharp. The fighting was brutal. Streets choked with dust and blood, buildings crumbling under the weight of artillery fire. But Valeria's forces pressed on, their training and desperation merging into a single, unyielding force. She watched it unfold from the Resolute's command center, her hands clenched against the railing. Victory was within reach, but it felt precarious, as if the slightest misstep would send everything spiraling into ruin. Commander, Reyes's voice broke through the static. We've breached their outer defenses. Casualties are high, but we're holding the line. Good. Keep pushing. I want their command center secured by nightfall. And if it's another trap, then we spring it and break them anyway. Reyes chuckled, the sound rough and weary. Understood. Valeria cut the channel and stared at the tactical display. Every decision felt like a gamble, the odds stacked against her by enemies unseen. Kalear's message had come days earlier, a warning of an imminent strike against her newly formed alliance. His sources claimed the enemy had gathered a coalition of disaffected worlds, those who saw humanity's rise as a threat rather than an opportunity. For the first time, El Consejo's influence had been diminished enough that others dared to defy them openly. But Valeria knew that not all opposition came from the outside. The very structure of her alliance was built on fragile agreements and promises of protection. And then there was Kalear himself. His loyalty had proven true on more than one occasion, but Valeria could not shake the nagging suspicion that he remained divided. His ties to El Consejo were not so easily severed. The blast doors to the command center slid open, and Kalear entered, his expression drawn and tense. You're here. She couldn't hide her surprise. I thought it wise to be where the decisions are made, he replied, and where the consequences fall. Are you suggesting I'm making mistakes? I'm suggesting that we may be underestimating our enemies. I never underestimate them. No, but you do underestimate the fear they wield. The council may be fractured, but its influence remains. There are those who will fight for the old order, even if it means scorched worlds and broken lives. I'm aware. Kalear's gaze softened. Then you know this battle isn't only about territory. It's about proving your vision can endure. I didn't bring you here to lecture me. No, he said, a hint of a smile breaking through. You brought me here because you needed someone willing to question you, and because you trust me, even if you won't admit it. She stared at him, the truth of his words settling like ash in her chest. Trust was a commodity she could ill afford, but Kalear had earned more of it than most. Fine, she conceded. What's your assessment? The resistance is too coordinated. Either they've unified under a single leader, or they've received aid from someone with deep knowledge of your tactics. You think it's one of my own? I think it's possible. And if it's true, you need to root them out before they do more damage. Valeria nodded, her mind already racing through possibilities. Paranoia was a constant companion, but sometimes it was justified. We'll find the leak, she said. But for now, the battle takes priority. Agreed. And for what it's worth, Valeria, I hope you succeed. She glanced at him, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. I thought you still believed in El Consejo's authority. I believe in peace. And right now, you're the only one offering something resembling it. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the gulf between them seemed smaller. Valeria wondered if they could ever truly be allies, or if their paths would always diverge at some critical juncture. But the time for doubts had passed. Then let's end this, she said, her voice resolute. The ground assault intensified, Valeria's forces tearing through the last defenses with relentless precision. Her enemies fought with desperation, their fanatical devotion to the old order evident in every blood-soaked street and shattered barricade. When the capital's command center finally fell, Valeria stood amidst the rubble, her gaze sweeping over the ruined city. It was a Pyrrhic victory, the cost measured not only in lives but in the trust she had once hoped to foster. But as she looked to the sky, where her fleet hung like sentinels, she knew the battle was far from over. The conspiracy had fractured El Consejo, but those loyal to the old ways would not simply vanish. Kalear approached, his expression unreadable. "It's done," she said. "For now," he replied. "But you've made enemies today. Enemies who will not rest until you are destroyed. Then they'll have to try harder." Kalear's smile was faint, but real. "I believe they will. But so will you." Valeria glanced at him, the challenge clear in her eyes. "I have no intention of losing." "Good," Kalear said, "because the real war has only just begun." Valeria turned away, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Whatever lay ahead, she would face it with the same unyielding resolve that had carried her this far. And as the dust settled over the battlefield, she knew her fight was only beginning.